Hi everyone. Yes, welcome to episode 2 of Astrologically Speaking. My name is Gabriel, and with me I have Cliff. Hi Cliff.
Hi guys, I'm Cliff, and welcome to episode 2.
We're going to talk about something that is dear to all of us, that is very current to all of us, and that is the Great Resignation. So I think the Great Resignation is not something that we are unfamiliar with by now. If you don't know yet, is this, what do we call it, like a social movement? Not really, right? It's sort of like a phenomenon, shall we say,
Yeah.
that sort of that is a result of COVID-19 in some way, where a lot of people, and we're talking about millions of people, are leaving their job um at a go, in a very short period of time. And they're not retrenched, they actually voluntarily resign.
Yep.
It's something that perhaps in Singapore we don't feel as much, because it's not such a big deal for us. Although one of the things that we do realize is that in the last few years, there are people from the service industry, from the food industry, from the arts industry, as well as the medical industry, especially the nurses, they're leaving in droves, right? So in some ways, Singapore is experiencing the Great Resignation in its own little way as well, but probably not as drastic as the US, UK, and a big part of the civilized, the first world. Yeah. So this thing has been with us. We've been talking about it on and off, both Cliff and I, and we didn't really quite decide that we're going to talk about this until, when we started thinking about, okay, what do we talk about for the second episode?
Yeah.
We decided that, yeah, we probably should talk about the Great Resignation. Firstly, because it is something that he cares about, right? And I'll leave Cliff to tell you why he cares about it. But for me, why I care about it is that I do see a lot of it happening in my clients. A lot of my clients come to me because they are part of the Great Vaccination movement. I have a lot of colleagues or ex-colleagues that actually left the jobs that they used to do, and move on to something else, right? So full disclosure, I'm a freelance drama educator, and a lot of my freelance drama educator friends actually left their jobs to pursue something that's a lot more stable, a lot more full-time, because of how COVID has sort of like disrupted the way we used to work, in schools. I'm also seeing it in some of my friends who actually left, full-time jobs to move into something else altogether. A lot of them actually went to study again. So in short, it's something that I'm seeing. And even my brother also left his job to become a financial advisor, right? And I guess I can consider myself as part of the Great Resignation lah, because essentially I did leave my previous job as a freelance drama educator to focus full time on my business. So perhaps that counts. I don't know. But yeah, so for me, this is something that I see, and I heard of this term from Simon Sinek, and it's just very interesting, to see this as a global phenomenon that is going on at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah. So Cliff, what about you? What's your relationship with Great Resignation?
Relationship with the Great Resignation. Yeah. Okay. So how do I explain this? The Great Resignation was coined by a professor in the University of Texas sometime in early or mid 2020. And that was basically to explain the phenomenon, like what Gabriel was saying, where about 4 million US workers were poised to quit their jobs voluntarily within that year. However, I think there are a lot more facets and aspects to the Great Resignation. When we say resignation, it sounds a bit like intense, a bit final. The CEO of LinkedIn calls it the Great Reshuffle, and I think that is a lot more encompassing and inclusive of people from different employment backgrounds, types, and situations, where it's more of like a redeployment. Like for Gabriel yourself, you move from freelancing into running your own business, and for majority of us, where we're working for a corporation, we are now, if we are able to, seeking more meaningful work. I think the underlying catalyst is obviously COVID-19, where many countries went into lockdown. There's this whole work from home movement. A vast majority of us had to work from home, and that created a lot of space, not necessarily physical, but mental space to think about what was important to us. There's a distinct separation from like money, status, showing off within the social group, because you couldn't meet up socially anymore. And so what's important to us, what's important to our careers, what does impact mean to us? And that created that, that itch to really align or find something to do that aligns with what is important to us. And I think that in a nutshell is what the Great Resignation was, and to some extent still is. And if you want to call it a great reshuffle, then it brought about a lot of significant advancement and changes to the way business was run. So, for example, Zoom was one of the big winners in the early parts of the pandemic. Previously, meetings were held physically in a room, but then now you could have Zoom meetings anywhere. We're recording this episode on Zoom as well, and so we'll start to bring in some astrological perspectives soon. But from a very lived experience, this was the Great Resignation of 2020.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with. I definitely like the term, the Great Reshuffle, or do you call it the Great Shuffle, or the Great Reshuffle? Reshuffle. I definitely like the term a lot better. I think it explains. I think it explains a lot better, and I agree with you that it's a lot more inclusive. And yeah, like really like the way humans work together has drastically, changed and shifted, because of the Great Resignation, and perhaps now it's time to sort of talk about, astrologically speaking, what's really happening. So yeah, Cliff and I, we have sort of discussed this. And we sort of agreed that, yeah, probably a single phenomenon that happened in 2020 is probably, a great, maybe not the one and only reason, but it's probably like the great starting point to think about why, the global phenomenon of Great Resignation happened. And we would like to just start with the Great Conjunction of 2020. So, Great Conjunction, what's that all about? So the Great Conjunction in mythical times, they call it the Kingmaker Conjunction, right? It's the conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter. Basically, in the past, Saturn and Jupiter they are the two furthest planets, right? Before Uranus and Neptune and Pluto was discovered. In ancient times, medieval astrologers, they see Jupiter and Saturn as these two very important planets that is at the liminal, that's the furthest from the Earth, right? And what they sort of always do when they see these two planets coming together is that they sort of coronate a king, which is why it's called a Kingmaker Conjunction, because it is the conjunction that makes king, right? So astrologically speaking, on a very mythical level, right, the Great Conjunction is supposed to be a very, very big deal, right? It happens every 20 years, so it is a big deal. Every 20 years is like a new cycle, a new cycle, a new cycle, right? But beyond that 20-year cycle, there's also a bigger sort of like a cycle, which is how like these two planets, when they conjunct together, or when they conjunct is essentially when these two planets sort of in our naked eye, they come together in a single spot, right? Rather than we see two, now we see them like together like as one, right? And so the thing is that usually when the Great Conjunction happens, when these two planets come together every 20 years, it always happens in a particular element, right? So previously, before 2020, it has always been in earth signs. So maybe they'll come together in, Taurus, they'll come together in Virgo, they'll come together in Capricorn, and then Taurus will go Capricorn, Taurus will go Capricorn. So it keeps, going in cycles again and again and again, right? And it was only in 2020 when suddenly there's this blip and there's this shift where these two planets are starting to come together, or rather 2020 marks the first year, the first official year where these two planets are coming together in an air sign. And in 2020, the air sign happens to be Aquarius, right? So essentially, previously it was earth signs, and then suddenly in 2020, it started going to air sign, right? And from there on, from here on, from 2020 onwards, all the way for the next 200 years, it's always going to be in air sign, air sign, air sign, air sign, air sign. So yeah, simplistically speaking, yeah, every 20 years it's been in a particular element, and then only in 2020 it has moved into the air, right? And from a very big picture, sort of astrological, big picture perspective, right, this is a really big deal, right? Because it typically stays in a particular element for 200 years, okay? And, I mean, I find that I am very lucky to be, well, lucky, maybe lucky is not the word, but it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal that I'm at a point where I'm in between both. I experience a bit of both, and it's a big deal because Earth and air, they are very different elements, right? Previously, when the conjunction happened in Earth, in the 200, if you think about it, in the last 200 years prior to 2020, say 1820 onwards to 200 to 2020, right? What are some of the big things that happened, right? The world actually became a lot more capitalistic, a lot more consumer driven. It's a lot about extracting resources, using resources. Industrial revolution happened in the era, right? Singapore was discovered during the era, right? And essentially, the rise of borders and empires, like colonization happened. And with colonization that happened, actually what happened is that a lot of traditional boundaries of these, of different countries, right? In before the colonizing power came, Southeast Asia, and even, a bit of other parts of Asia and South Africa as well, right? The idea of like a boundaries and sort of like a national boundaries, right? It's not a thing. Like nobody cares. Like for them, it's like the idea that we all live in one land and we have different sphere of influence, right? But since the 1820 to 2020, things becomes harder. It becomes a lot more tangible. There's a tangibilizing of the world essentially, right? And so that's the Earth bit, right? So in short, 8020 to 2020, the world was very Earth lah, very much about money lah, resources lah, tangible stuff, right? Now 2020 onwards, based on this theory, the world is supposed to become a lot more air, right? And air is supposed to be not so tangible, right? It's supposed to be less about the money and less about the resources and more about information, ideas, concepts. So since then, there's this phenomenal shift, right, from Earth to air, right? Even the idea of a coronavirus that is spreading around the world is also an air idea because, technically it's an air disease, right? Because you only kena if you breathe in some droplets that's in the air, someone spit the droplets onto you and it kena you, then you kena lah. So
I think additional keywords and concepts that are related to air is also around ideas, that's one, and also of connection, trade, negotiation, balance, and stuff like that. So those are the kind of keywords. And I think from connection and communication as well, we see the rise of social media companies. Like previously, before this, you already had Facebook and Instagram and all that, but now TikTok, Snap, no, not really Snap, but TikTok and its copycats and that new brand of social media ecosystems are more prominent. everywhere,
Mm.
and how we communicate as well. Our language has been evolving all the time, but now it's a lot more concise. It requires a lot of context, which is again air. And like if you look at meme culture, it's like one picture with text on it or not, and it conveys so many layers and levels of information, and that's also very air-like versus the Earth style of communicating, where if you had letters, that was letters. Emails was still just a digitized letter, whereas now it's no longer about digitization, it's digitalization, which is all everything is going to be end to end, put in the air, put in the cloud, basically. Cloud computing also air.
Yeah. So if you notice, between, if you notice some of the phenomenal stuff that has happened since 2020 to now, right, is that like a lot of things have sort of like gone into the air in some way, right? Let's say, you want to buy food, or right, previously you need to go down to the market and buy on your own. Now just make a call, right, and someone will deliver it for you, right? That's an air concept because technically it's sort of like you don't have to be there. Earth is very tangible, right? You need to be there, you need to be present. But air isn't. Air is very much about like you do something and it comes to you. Zoom meeting. We are doing this over Zoom, right? And we are not the first podcast that started during the air era. I think since 2020, a lot of people suddenly had a lot more time. So a lot of people actually started new podcasts all over the world. Like my favorite Brene Brown also started a podcast during 2020, So there's this like everything that is tangible, that is very earth, since 2020 is sort of like transcribed into a more of a what we call an air format, right? And I think it's probably time for us to examine, what do we mean by air format and what is this manifestation of the air era?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
We talk a little bit about it in terms of Zoom, TikTok, and all that. But yeah, what are some of the manifestations of the air era? Cliff, what do you think?
So manifestations of air, I think taking one quick step back, one thing I wanted to point out also is that these things, if you were like me, you were thinking that these things didn't happen overnight, and indeed they did not. The things, all of these need time to build up momentum, but the whole concept of changing into a different element is that you wake up one morning and then suddenly, it's just everywhere. And there will slowly be a build up to carry a greater importance and significance of all these new air technologies, air concepts and processes. So again, to answer your question, what is air? And one of the examples I'm going to zoom back in on is video. Prior to this, it was all about emails. It was about voice messages. If you were familiar with WeChat in China, it was all voice messages as well. But now suddenly there's this medium or this platform where you would just FaceTime or you would Zoom video call, and that fundamentally changed a lot of the ways that we did a lot of things. Video now carries so much more importance. If you don't have video, the algorithm on TikTok is not going to promote the thing that you uploaded. And part of that is also just increased bandwidth and increased data storage. Again, in itself, data is air, and data storage is a manifestation of that air era.
Yeah. I want to explain a little bit more about why we keep talking about how technology is air, why data storage is air. So firstly, there's this obvious thing called the cloud, which is also air, right? That's a bad pun, but yeah. But the idea is that everything that lives in it's so bandwidths, for example, Wi-Fi bandwidths, they are all electromagnetic waves. They're waves in some way. And waves are essentially what we consider as like particles that's in the air, so to speak, right? Energetic particles that's in the air, right? So that's why we say that these things are very air. Information is very air, because word of mouth information, for example, you tell me, I tell you, it's traveled through the air. Any kind of communication, and any kind of communication and information communication and all that, everything is considered air. Anything else is considered air.
Changing tracks to explain that, let's look at one of the big things that happened in 2020, and that was Black Lives Matter. So that's very not inclusive, it's community-minded movements. That's not to say that these things never happened before, but the way that it was broadcast, the way that it spread, it was a viral movement.
The viral video, for example,
Yes.
a viral video that sort of spread that as well.
Yes. So the movement itself, Black Lives Matter, that is an air communal concept. The keywords are just used: viral movement. Virality itself is an air concept.
That's like COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly like COVID-19. So, there's so much more depth and explanation to air, but I think you guys kind of get the gist. Anything that's, like what Gabriel was saying, bandwidth, transmissible, technology-driven, and social-mindedness, that's kind of air. Anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I think we probably can explain this better, but we are still trying to learn how to explain this better. So yeah, just go with us lah. Just go with us lah. So these are some of the things that made 2020 to 2022 like so phenomenal, is that suddenly ideas are important, technologies are important. Suddenly the idea of community mindedness, the idea of like equity is important. The idea of people is important. The idea of mental well-being, which is about taking care of people, right? That's also important, right? So one of the things that we know for sure is going to explode in the next 200 years, right? Because it's air era, right? Is going to be new technologies to help the transmission of information. Great new ideas that will spread around the world. New communities, new communal way of living. New ways of looking and interacting with communities will be the new thing, that will come out in the next 200 years, right? Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to point out also, and we have this on our notes that we put up when we were preparing for this episode, is cross-disciplinary education. The age of Earth was very driven by ROI, return on investment, was very driven by impact and deep specializations that were of use to society and the world. So that's why you had chemistry, the physical sciences, where on the other hand, the more fluffy, conceptual social sciences like sociology, psychology, they were kind of the unwanted cousin of the family, like the black sheep of the family. But now with mental well-being coming on board, being more mainstream, psychiatry becomes more socially accepted. And also here, I think you can talk about the Duke NUS one, Gabriel, but the cross-disciplinary education, a broad-based education, was actually the very basis of classical education back in Greek and Roman times as well.
And those were during the air era, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. And in order to be like a politician or a statesman, you needed to, I forgot what the three words are: logos, pathos, and something else. Yeah, you had
ethos, logos, pathos, ethos.
Yes, you needed to have logic, synthesis, and oratory skills, and we see that coming back again.
In the last 2 years since 2020, we see the rise. We didn't just see the rise of video from new forms of communication like TikTok and Zoom. And we also see COVID-19, right, and all that. So these are what we call the manifestation of the air era. Other manifestations include cross-disciplinary education, interdisciplinary education. It's not a new thing. Technically, it's been around, but there wasn't much commitment to it, right? But recently, NUS just just dissolve UNUS and sort of combine it with I think the USP program, the University Scholar program, to form the new college, which is supposed to have a common curriculum, which is broad-based, and then they can do specialization from there. Also, there is the humanities, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, which is where I was from. Okay, it got recently combined with the Faculty of Science, and now it became the College of Humanities and Sciences, right? And that was that created quite a bit of a ruckus for some of the university professors that I know. And they're also talking about, they also just combined the School of Design and Environment with the School of Engineering. So now they're going to be called the College of Design and Engineering, right? So increasingly, it's what's in vogue, right? Is no longer specialization. You need to start to be a little bit of a generalist, now, more and more so, right?
I'm laughing because my job scope has been changing so much in the past 6 months. Like we have to, there's this term called double hatting, triple hatting. Basically, your one job is the scope of 3 different job scopes previously. And that's getting more and more common. Like I'm a business partner, I'm a program manager, I'm a functional trainer. And this kind of merging, like what you said, that broad base it's only going to be more and more common.
Yeah. And this is very air because, air is fluid. It's flowy, it spreads everywhere, it can change any form you want, it is very flexible, right? So one of the broad trends that we want to get everyone to be on board on is to go and learn something new, to go and expand new skills, because the world is going towards the direction for sure, right? Another manifestation of the air era is the rise of cryptocurrency. It is such a rise that I'm someone that is completely not interested in cryptocurrency whatsoever, right? For me, it's just like, what is this thing that is so strange and so weird? Can I depend on it whatsoever? I actually got onto the crypto train since 2021, right? And Bitcoin boom in 2020, and then it boomed again in 2021. And the crypto space is really, really complex. I cannot tell you more, but it is very air because it is talking about creating new and different ways of sort of spreading and sort of transmitting information.
It's a space where the most exciting idea wins.
Yeah, right. And have you heard about how in Web3, Web2 is the rise of corporation like Facebook and all that to sort of exchange information, but then they do it under a particular sort of corporate and banner. Web3 promises to be to be a space where you own your web space and no one else can own that space but yours. If it's yours, it's yours. So that's also very interesting, and I'll be interested to see where it'll be going.
I think more than cryptocurrencies, the underlying technology of cryptocurrency, blockchain, that has given rise to DAO, so decentralized autonomous organizations. So that's also very communal, where decision making.
Decentralized. I just want to point out that decentralization, autonomy is a very air concept, because centralization itself, having a authority at the center, right, is a very consolidative concept, which is very earth. Decentralization, right, is a spreading out concept, which is a very air element type of movement, right?
And I think that's not to say that one is better than the other.
Naturally.
It's just a natural, just characteristics of these elements. Things worked great in the Earth era, but it was imperfect. There was a lot of things that could be improved, and you're going to see that very similar theme as well in the air era. That things will work well, technologically advanced, but there's a lot of this discrepancy or gaps and places for improvement as well. So I'm just saying this because I do know of very idealistic colleagues that are like, the age of air is what you need to 100% go into, get prepared for. But that's actually not 100% true. You need to always have balance, especially, internally and yourself. And as with everything lah, basically. But just a caveat there. Industry 4.0 is another thing. Manufacturing 4.0 might be a term that might not be very familiar in this part of the world because we are not heavily reliant on manufacturing anymore. But manufacturing or industry 4.0, whichever you want to call it, it's about improved manufacturing processes, relooking at logistics lah, basically supply chain. It used to be just focused either on just in time or first in, first out, last in, last out. But all these concepts are too siloed, and now it's a progression or a change in how we manage inventory. Inventory is decentralized as well. Amazon has warehouses globally, and it's not a central warehouse that gets, things get shipped out. And I think the more examples we go through, the more you will see, these connective themes happening again and again. And the main point that I personally want to bring across is that hopefully with these themes, these directional gauges or guesses over the past 2 years since the age of air started, this will help you position yourself to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve.
So now we circle back to the Great Resignation. And if you're part of the Great Resignation movement or the Great Reshuffling movement, if you're thinking about changing jobs, if you're thinking about resigning from your old job and, going to something that is meaningful, going to something that is probably more, in line with where the world is going, astrologically speaking, what are some of the industries that we think would be hot? Okay, so this is going to be like a quick fire kind of round, I guess.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so he's gonna say one, I'm gonna say one. We're just gonna keep rolling until we have nothing else to say lah. Okay, so ready? Cliff. So what do you think will be the next, the next 200 years? As we move into the air era, what do you think will be some of the hot industry that people can move into?
I think I'll expand it, not just industry, but functions and skills, because the world of work is going to be focused on skills rather than industry experience.
Love that.
So I'll start off by saying program management, project and program management, because that requires a lot of synthesis, that requires a lot of community building as well. So that's one.
So that I definitely agree with that. I think any kind of work that deals with people is definitely going to be hot on the table. So, astrology, for example, being an astrologer, being a tarot reader, working with people, being a coach, right? Being an OD practitioner. So OD is
organizational development.
Yes, organizational development, right? And these two are things which are these two are sort of like functions that is getting pretty hot. It's actually very hot in the Western world. You throw a stone, there's this company that's hiring an OD practitioner, or this person who has a coach, right? Or even a therapist, right? And all these functions, they're actually on the rise in Asia. Asia is the fastest growing market for coaching, for example. And we are definitely predicting that, or at least I'm definitely predicting that the coaching, the OD space and the therapy space is something that will get more and more momentum in the next few years, even in the next 200 years or so, right? I think even in Singapore itself, we are also gearing towards a greater mental health trend. Suddenly the Health Promotion Board is talking about mental health, and they are starting to sort of like, they're starting to hire people to deal with mental health, these days, in companies. So that's definitely a trend that we can all look forward to and move into. And if you've always been interested in these sort of things, this is definitely something that you should zoom in on as well. Yeah, Cliff?
I would say another thing that allows progression or progressiveness. So you would see the rise in ESG, environment, social governance. So that will be more of like Microsoft has a philanthropy arm. How do you give back to community? That's where you help the lesser or underrepresented groups and communities as well. So there are jobs that do that. There's also environmental protection. There is also how do you bring your corporation to become net zero? These are roles that are still new and few and far between, but that's definitely going to be something that's going to grow. It's going to be greater accountability demanded of large corporations as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to also talk about as a relevant industry trend as we move into the era is probably the energy sector, and not the traditional coal, natural gas, oil, that's very resource centric, that's very earth, right? And especially with the with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis that's happening right now, all the countries are sort of like noticing and realizing like how precarious it is that they are depending on Russia for oil reserves and natural gas, and how if they become bad actors, it becomes very problematic, right? So I think one of the things that that's something that will change is the rise of nuclear power, right? Learning, if moving towards the nuclear space, for example, the energy space, maybe it doesn't have to be nuclear. It could be renewable sources of energy like solar or even wind, I think those are things that will be in vogue as well. So that's what I think.
I think the last one for each of us for this quick fire would be a role or a function that allows the transmission of knowledge. So traditionally, we would understand these to be like teachers, instructors, maybe some coaches, L&D, and stuff like that. But that kind of stand-up classroom-driven live training is going to be automated. So finding yourself in a position where you're able to facilitate, synthesize information, condense it, and transmit it, that is going to be something that's going to be extremely valuable, especially if you can bring that human touch. How that would look like, I have no idea. But definitely what I'm seeing is that trainers, teachers, those kind of very process-driven jobs are going to be automated. What's valuable then is that human interaction and that transmission of emotions.
I want to just jump off from what you just said and offer my final, rapid fire, spit fire, I don't know what you call it, kind of input about what is in vogue, right? Facilitation will be in vogue. I firmly believe this because the idea of teaching, the idea of like lecturing, is a very consolidative kind of like work where one person has the power, one person knows everything, and the person has all the answers, right? But as we move into the age of air, where things are less certain, Earth is very certain, air isn't, right? As we move to the age of air, we're going to start to learn from different sources, and learning to facilitate is a big deal because you are learning to help someone connect with another person. You're learning to facilitate, like let's say 5 different people in a team, and 5 of them all have different skill sets, right? And learning to facilitate means that you can sort of help all 5 of them to sort of like intermingle and spread their skill set around, spread their knowledge around, spread their know-how around. And that's the big deal. And I think facilitation, is the next big thing that will be where the world is going into. So differentiated learning rather than the traditional forms of like one kind of learning where there's a teacher and everyone else is a student.
I think also just to cap off again, just to be very conscious that all these keywords and skills are still very siloed, still very segmented. We're talking about facilitation, we're talking about some of the other examples that we came up with, but it's also important to remember that we need to combine a combination or a synthesis of all these different skills, because job titles will no longer be solid. It's going to be fluid. It's going to be air. So like, for example, what does a program manager do? He does everything. He needs to synthesize, he needs to facilitate, he needs to coach, he needs to drive. So like what Gabe said is beautiful. It's not compartmentalized anymore. It's not certain. We need to be able to operate very comfortably in ambiguity. You might have heard the term of VUCA, VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's been done to death, but I think it's going to come back in so much force.
Yeah, I recently just included the term VUCA in my astrological course material as a way to sort of market it. Yeah, which is true, because the world is going to be increasingly complex and uncertain. And even the term VUCA does not cut it anymore. Actually, now they have a new term. Don't know what's the name lah, but yeah, there's a new term to it. Yeah, but So anything else from you?
No, I think let's transition into something that would be of practical help. I think we've confused them enough.
Yeah. We try to explain this is supposed to be a very simple topic in our mind. When we first planned it, it's like, it's so simple. There's not much astrology, right? Just one concept, we just talk about it. And then we realize, wow, it's actually really, really complex. So I hope we have shed some lights. And we are now going to move into our last and final segment, which is about learning astrology. So here we go.
So welcome to our Learn Astrology for episode 2. And what we're going to try to do in this segment today is to try and put everything together, synthesis again, into something that you can do. Like, we know that this wave is coming where barriers will be broken down, silos will be mixed up, and you can't just hide behind one skill set. You need to have a mix. But even so, even if you go through the processes, what is it that's gonna help you find a role or a function or a vocation that you actually enjoy and you find meaning in? So while we were discussing this, I think we agreed upon talking about Venus, which is the planet of love, yes, relationships, yes, but also more importantly, values. Values specifically, like what I value. I value the fact that you are giving me your time to listen to us ramble on this podcast. I value that I have air conditioning and a flushable toilet, that kind of value.
Yeah, so what do you value, right? So as a way to sort of like round today's episode, to talk about what we value, based on our Venus signs, right? Would be a great way to perhaps to help all of you to, find how you can move out from your job into a new one. Because at the end of the day, the job can change, but what you value don't change, right? And we're not gonna annoy all of you with like talking about the 12 different Venus signs, right? Because it's quite long, and we're just gonna confine and make it really, really short. So we're just gonna talk about Venus in the elements. If you are interested in finding out what element your Venus is in, you can go to any astrological chart generating website.
You can go to my website. I have a free chart generator.
Me too.
Nice.
So so my website is thirdeyeshere.com, and your website is what?
cliffneo.com.
cliffneo.com. Okay, so go to any of our websites, okay, and there is a chart generator. Just put in your birth details and it will generate for you where your Venus, it will generate everything but the key part to understand, to know, so that you can apply to, the key part for you to find out so that the episode makes sense to you is to find out which element your Venus is in. Okay, so what do you value? Venus in the elements. So let's start with the fire signs.
Let's start with fire.
Okay, so the fire signs are the Venus in Aries, the Venus in Leo, and the Venus in Sagittarius. So if you have Venus in fire signs,
is yours in fire? Okay.
No, mine's not in fire. We can talk more about mine later, but what is your Venus, by the way?
Mine's in Scorpio, water.
Oh yeah, same lah, same. I'm also water. Okay,
Okay.
we talk about water later, but let's talk about fire first. Fire. Okay, so we have Venus in Aries, Venus in Sagittarius, and Venus in Leo. What is it that you value? Right. Cliff, do you want to go first?
So very broadly, Venus in the fire signs, they value passion, they value excitement, things that excite them, things that make their heart go boom, 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 right? Like badok, badok, badok. Singaporean joke there. But yeah, so I think what exactly is it that makes your heart go fluttery? That's something that I would encourage you to really think about. It may not necessarily be just one thing, but really a class of things. Like it might be adrenaline, it might be attention, it might be going out on stage, things like that.
The drama, the expression, what else? Drama, expression,
the creativity, like Steve Jobs, for example, he was so passionate about the Zen aesthetics in all his products. I can't remember what he signed his Venus is in, but that kind of like passion is a keyword as well for fire. So what exactly gets you going?
Yeah, so if you have Venus in the fire sign, what you value would probably be something that's very exciting, very excitable. And yeah, perhaps that's what you can look for in your job. And I have seen a couple of people with Venus in fire signs who are teachers, right? Teachers because they get to be in front and they get to be loud and to shout. And to shouting is loud, but it makes people right? Because someone shout at you, right?
Yeah.
Learning as well. Things which are learning based, very exciting, very exploratory, so this is what the Venus in fire signs would value.
So you notice that teaching is not necessarily air, it's what that they derived out of teaching, which is the excitement. So that's fire.
Yeah. That's a good one. So, anything else for Venus in fire signs?
Yep, let's keep it simple.
Okay, let's move on to Venus in earth signs. So, Venus in earth signs are the Venus in Taurus, Venus in Virgo, Venus in, what's the last one? Capricorn. Shit, how can I forget?
Ayo, jialat.
Okay, Venus in earth signs. I'm gonna say that this is my assessment and my judgment.
Right.
I would say that they would have a harder time transiting to the air era because what they value is pretty much the world before 2020, which is things which are very stable, very tangible, very exacting, very clear, very sure, very
compartmentalized.
Very steady lah, like in Singapore I like to say steady pom pipi, that kind of thing that it's that's unchanging essentially, right? So it's also these are the people who value money as well, I would say, right? Anything else?
So what else? So Venus in the earth signs, like you said, I would say that they value stability, things that are slow, things that are certain, money, status, certainty, basically, for sure. How do I know how well I'm doing? So if you are ever in an environment like a sales environment where you get to stack rank yourself against your competition, that's something that you value. So competition may be something, comparisons, where you're able to do that. So if you're a socialite as well, you enjoy that, then that's fine because that's very Venus in earth. It's also luxurious. So basically things with physical markers of success, of but that's not to say that these are worthless or not valuable. A carpenter, someone that works with physical materials as well, definitely will still have a place and a demand for your passions here.
So essentially these are what the Venus in earth signs would value. So if you move into if you move into changing to a new job due to the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffling, consider how how that can help you to find the new job that you want.
Yeah. So a specific example, I'm sorry, because I managed to just check Steve Jobs' chart while we were talking. His Venus is in Capricorn, and you can see if you read his biography, he was so obsessed about status, so obsessed about the physical form of his products. It has to be white, it has to be X, Y, and Z. And he was so concerned about what people thought about his products. So, yeah, that's Venus in Earth.
So let's talk about Venus in the air signs and what you would value. So Venus in air, these are the best people in my assessment. These are the best people for the air era because what you value is in line with where the world is going, right? Which is very much about virus. You value virus. No, I'm kidding. You value exchanges. You value ideas, concepts. You value people. At least the idea and the ideal of the people centricity, the people centeredness, these are the people that would probably do very well in things like coaching, in things like being a I don't know, doing sales.
Being able to connect with another human being.
Connection. Connection is something as well. Valuing connection.
You can be an actor as well, or like what we said before, teacher. So that's the transmission of knowledge as well. So that's air. But you're doing it because you're excited about the transmission of information.
Ideas, yes. So So that's one way. So if you have Venus in the air sign, these are the things that you will value, and hopefully this can help you in making the transition. As we soldier on in the Great Resignation and Great Reshuffling. Anything else from you, Cliff?
No, all good for air.
Okay. And the last one is Venus in the water sign. So this one we're very familiar because Cliff has Venus in Scorpio and I have Venus in Cancer, both watery signs. And Venus in the water signs are the Cancer, the Scorpio and the Pisces. I realized I didn't talk about the Venus in the air sign, which is so Venus in the air sign. If you have Venus in Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra, those are Venus in air sign, right? Venus in water sign, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So for water sign, they value. What do we value?
Emotional depth, emotional security. I would say very selective with who you would want to spend your time with. So, but I think that's circumstantial. The actual thing that you might be passionate or interested in doing in terms of like a vocation would then be like probably research, work that is depth, work that is meaningful, work that has deep impact as well. That's one.
Water. So I find that water sign is like one of the hardest to explain because it's the most intangible. If you think like air sign is intangible, water sign is even more intangible, even more subtle, right? Counseling, listening to people's problem, dealing with, not necessarily dealing and problem solving, but bearing witness to people's problem, offering comfort, offering help. So like nursing, for example, working in orphanage, working in old folks home, elderly
asylum
homes,
and prisons.
In asylum. Asylum prisons.
So going back to the example of teachers again, we touched a little bit on a fire teacher. A Venus in fire teacher is excited by the interactions, the attention, and the drama that comes with going on stage. We didn't talk so much about a Venus in Earth, but a Venus in Earth teacher will be driven by status. Like you acknowledge me as being superior. I aspire to become head teacher. Venus in Air would teacher will be genuinely excited about the knowledge itself or the connection that I'm making when I'm transmitting that knowledge. A Venus in water will be more nurturing. I'm excited about seeing you grow, using this information to protect and develop yourself, as well as feeding you that knowledge for your future.
So if you have Venus in the water signs, you will value deep emotional connection. You will value values like nurturance, values like really sort of like giving people space to nurture, giving people nurturing space to work with things. It will value sort of like healing them. You value helping them. You value counseling them. This sort of so if you notice like this umbrella, the energy is a lot more subtle. It's a lot more serious, not the word, but it's a lot softer. Right?
Yeah,
it's a lot softer.
it's a lot more reactive.
Yeah, a lot more reactive in a way. Yeah.
I think I want to zoom out again and really emphasize, because this thing comes up in a lot of career astrology consultations. It's like, what job should I go for? What industry am I suited for? The main, that's the wrong way of approaching it. Not really wrong way. I don't agree with that approach. What I would encourage us to look at is what job is it that you're excited about doing? If it's a teacher, then what is it about teaching that you're so excited about? Is it one of these four that we just described? And then once you zoom in on that, then focus on being that best earth teacher, being the head teacher, or being the real, transmission of knowledge, the subject matter expert. That's where you derive more value and more meaning from your work. Rather than trying to fit into what society has told you a teacher should be.
So for those with Venus in water signs, hopefully this helps, and this help you to have a better idea of how you can pivot yourself as you move. If you decide to be part of the Great Resignation or part of the Great Reshuffle, right?
Yep.
Any last words from you, Cliff, and me for this segment before we close?
If you are curious about your own chart, feel free to either go to either one of our websites to generate your chart free report, or reach out to us for a more in-depth conversation.
My one not free report. Sorry, my one got I think got general stuff but not free report. Yeah,
it's a good place to start.
Yeah, good place to start. Yeah. So yes, so this is the end of episode 2. We just we hope you learned some stuff from today, and we hope that we are not too naggy and too cannot stop talking. Talkative. I don't know what's the term for it, but yeah. Anything from you, Cliff, before we call it an end to this episode?
No, just thank you so much for spending your time with us. Any questions, comments, just feel free to shoot us a DM or drop a comment below.
And I also want to appeal to all of you, if you have any topics that you want us to talk about, right, using astrology to look at it, please feel free to recommend it to us. So yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And we are going to sign off. So thank you, guys. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.